Okay, today we will discuss theme concepts in literature. And yes, I am not here in class, but we'll approach this exactly the same way as we normally do in class, just with a little bit of less question and answer time during the lecture. Before we begin the lecture, I'd like to recommend something that some of you have been doing in the past during lectures like this, and you may wish to do today. And that's pairing with a note buddy, if you will. So some of you have shared notes files, and that means that you create a file on Google Drive for your notes. And this time you can call it theme notes. One of you creates it and then shares it with a buddy so you can take notes together. Now this can be really helpful because one of you might pick up something that the other missed, and you can add to notes and make your note-taking a little bit more efficient, and you've got excellent notes at the end of the class period. A good way to divide this, if you wanted, is for one of you to take notes on what I write and post on the slide, and another to take notes on what I speak. You know I have a tendency to embellish and add examples to everything that's written up there on the board, and sometimes it's a little confusing to some of you that I go as fast as I do. So feel free to grab a note buddy and share a file. If you want to pause this video while everybody takes care of it, go ahead. But set up those files now, please. Okay, let's move on into theme. We'll start with my pretty fancy definition. Actually, no, let's not start there. What I would usually do if I were here is ask some questions about what some of you know theme to be, and I can anticipate quite a few of your answers. You've talked about it in class before. Some of you say it is what the story is about. Some of you say it's the meaning of a story. Some of you say it's the moral or the lesson of a story. And however you do it, moral, lesson, meaning, what the story is about, these are all talking about something that is abstract. So if I were to say, in The Telltale Heart, a man murders his neighbor, that's concrete. That's something that actually happens. But if I say that the story is about some kind of abstract philosophical concept, now I'm talking about theme. The former is me talking about plot, what happens in the story. And the latter is me talking about theme. So if in Flowers for Algernon, I talked about the fact that Charlie underwent an operation, that's plot, because it's concrete, it actually happens in the story. But if I say Flowers for Algernon is talking about science and the effects of science on the human mind, then I'm talking about something that's abstract. So when we say that theme is what the story's about, or it's the meaning of a story, or the moral lesson of the story, we're always talking about some kind of abstract notion. Let me give you my fancy definition. Theme, the central insight into human nature provided by a piece of literature. Pause for a moment to let you write that one down. The central insight into human nature provided by a piece of literature. Insight brings me to mind once again of something that is abstract. Of course, we're talking about stories in everything we said before. And I want to emphasize this. Insight into human nature. Because as we've discussed in class before, stories always focus on people. I would never write a story about a chair and what it's like to be a chair, primarily because I can't know what it's like to be a chair. I know what it's like to be a human being. So themes always focus on insights into human nature. And if you want to know if you're dealing with a theme, you might consider whether this is some big experience that could be had by a human, or is it something that's shared with the desk? Both the desk and I are affected by gravity. So that must not be a real subject for theme. But I, on the other hand, can experience choices. I can make choices, good choices and bad choices. The desk cannot. So that might be a good way to think about human nature. What is it that makes me different from that desk? Let's go into some principles. And remember, if at any time going too fast for you and your note buddy to keep up with, well, this is a recorded video and it does have a pause button. Feel free to use it. Themes can be ambiguous. Big word. But that means that they can be unclear or even contradictory. Do not always expect a theme to be spot on clear. If you were to deal with something like Aesop's Fables, you know, the tortoise and the hare, or if you were to deal with a story like The Little Boy Who Cried Wolf, yeah, the themes will be really clear. They are specific lessons about how to behave as human beings. But if you deal with something that's more complex, even something like The Hunger Games, you'll find themes that are not quite so clear. And especially if you read that entire trilogy, you'll find that meaning and the lessons that you take out of this story are not always as clearly understandable as you might hope them to be. In my opinion, that makes them better. So themes can sometimes be unclear. Another principle. Themes can be expressed as complete sentences. I'll go into how to do this in a little bit, but they can be expressed as complete sentences. So don't say that science is a theme, for instance. You must express what the theme of science is saying in the story. And like I said, we'll go into that in just a moment and provide some details and examples. One final principle. Authors often comment on vitally important aspects of human experience. So they'll talk about love, and they'll talk about death, and they'll talk about hate, and they'll talk about free will, and they'll talk about oppression and racism, but they won't talk about the experience of typing on a keyboard, because that's not a vitally important aspect of human experience. It is a human experience. Certainly the desk can't seem to have it, but it's not one that goes to the very center of who we are as human beings. So those are your principles for theme. And I'll pause there for a moment again. And let's move on. Let's talk about how to find themes. Sometimes they can seem pretty easy to find, and often I've seen that students just sort of cast about and kind of construct themes in a sort of hit or miss, mistake-prone kind of fashion until they get something that works. I'd like to give you a little bit more of a systematic approach to finding themes in literature. So the themes, first of all, are based on ideas called thematic concepts. This is the first ingredient, the first step to finding a theme. You find a thematic concept. And what are thematic concepts? Well, they're things like these, ideas like these. You do not need to write down these ideas. You could write down some as examples, but you don't have to worry about writing the entire list, especially because I'm about to add to it. All of these ideas on the screen are aspects of human experience that differentiate me from the desk, and furthermore, they're very important. I could add to these racism, bullying, what else? Beauty. Let's see here. Free will. Choice. Sacrifice. I can't construct a complete list of themes. I don't think anybody's ever tried. You could mention some of the major themes in literature, but authors tend to want to explore all aspects of who we are. So this list cannot be complete. It's anything that's relevant and important to our experience. So we start there. We start by thinking about what the thematic concept for a story might be. From there, we move to the next step. The next step is to tell what the story is saying about that concept. And this is the comment. So let's say that my concept, for instance, is lying. Boy Who Cried Wolf. What does the Boy Who Cried Wolf say about lying? Lying damages character. Because in that story, the boy lost the trust of the townspeople, the villagers, due to his consistent lying. So lying damages character. This part is the comment. It's what I'm saying about the concept. So I talk about lying, and what am I saying about lying? I'm saying it damages character. You start here, you go to here, you put 1 and 2 together, and you have a full theme. Let me give you another example. So I could say, my thematic concept is insanity. It works as a thematic concept. Again, it's an experience that I can have that the desk cannot. It seems to be a pretty important aspect of human experience. So this works as a thematic concept. I can mention any synonyms that I want. I could call it madness, craziness. I could call it psychosis. All dealing with the same basic abstract issue, insanity. Now let's make a comment on it. Insanity overwhelms the mind. It is an unstoppable opponent. If I just said this, this would be my thematic comment. And putting the two together, I get a theme. The author won't necessarily come right out and tell you this directly. Some stories include themes that are told directly. Usually a character states them. But I can infer that this is the theme in a story. And that'll bring me to my next point. The next point is about supporting theme. And I'll ask a question. Is this theme the theme of the telltale heart? Insanity overwhelms the mind. As some of you would say, probably yes. Most of you would say yes. And I designed this such that you would say yes. That's not the interesting question. The question is, how do you know? How do you know that this is the theme? And this is the point in the lesson where I would start asking you guys questions. You'd come up with brilliant answers, and I'd throw them up on the board. Unfortunately, I'm not here to do that. So let me kind of give you a bit of poor representation of our discussion. Some of you would probably say, well, the narrator is insane. Yes, the narrator is insane. That's what helps me find my thematic concept. So I know first there's the theme of the Telltale Heart because insanity figures into the narrator's characterization. All right? Overwhelms the mind. The narrator feels a lack of control in the murder. Good. That vulture eye forces him into the act. He seems to have no control over it. Furthermore, the beating of the heart which we know does not exist, it's a symptom of the insanity, overwhelms him. So there's more evidence of the insanity overwhelming. And further, you could pull some quotations that show the narrator saying directly that he did not feel like he was in control of his actions. So certainly, this seems to be the theme of the Telltale Heart. If you were to write a paragraph about it, hint, hint, then you would probably want to support this thematic, or this entire theme with that evidence and show how it's, show how Poe develops it throughout the story. Okay, so that's a bit of a lightning race through the concept of theme, but of course it's just a basic introduction. Throw it into your notes. And tomorrow we will start to brainstorm how we can find themes in the stories that we've read. And then on Friday, of course, you'll write about it. As always, if you need to go back through this video for any reason, feel free to do so. You want to share and talk about notes that you missed, feel free to do that as well. But stay tuned for tomorrow's application, and I will see you then.